like, how do you manage the negatives in terms of like making sure everyone's respectful and we don't have any dickheads coming into the co-living space that make it uncomfortable for anyone
Yeah,
else?
I think this is where we take a lot of our learnings from the co-working side, where we spend a number of years as a group, as a team, where we've learned very quickly that you needed to curate your membership, and you very much needed to be very proactive in screening out, what we would refer to as the dickheads, and have a no dickheads policy that is, without exception. Because as we all, the old saying, one bad apple ruins the bunch, is very true in any sort of community-based delivery of service. So just making sure that we're very clear about our rules and the community rules when people come to be a part of the community, and then also very quickly managing out people who aren't the right fit. And by that, we don't mean people that don't look or speak how we like them to look or speak, but simply don't respect others, both personal space, property, are predatory in nature for obvious reasons. You can imagine that's highly problematic. Those sorts of things, if spotted at any level, get addressed very, very quickly, and there's no sort of, 6, 7, 9 lives like a cat. It's kind of like, 1, 2, boom, you're gone. And the entire legal framework around our agreement to deliver this product and service is very much structured so that we have those rights, versus traditional tenancy rights, which would give you massive amounts of control over staying, even if the community doesn't want. Yeah, so we're very much coming at it from, this is a tenancy. This is not a tenancy scenario. This is a membership scenario.
Yep.
You have to really make sure people understand that, and also, that unbecoming behaviour can be acted on immediately.
Yeah. So, how has co-living been growing in New Zealand and Australia, and how has that been comparing to co-living overseas, like in the United States and Europe? Do we have the same adoption rates, or is it more of an emerging field, or how's it working?
Look, it's growing. I mean, I guess when you start from one, growth seems pretty exponential initially, because one another player comes into the market, it's 100% growth, right? So, on a percentage basis, it's significant growth globally. Pre-crisis, I mean, it's a little hard to get a bit of a feel for where things are at, particularly right now. And a lot of people kind of look at me cross-eyed and I say, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice for us to all live closer together?" Anyway, parking that part of it momentarily. So it has been growing, exceptionally well. In markets like Europe, the elements of co-living have been around for quite some time. So it's a little bit of a new wrapper on an old product, and with a little bit of fresh energy and buzz. But, likes across the UK, heading down towards or heading across to North America, the growth has been substantial. Asia is kind of starting to kind of get hold of the idea, but it's still, by comparison to, say, something like co-working, it's still in its infancy. And I would even argue that co-working is still relatively new as a model. So this is even more so. But the quantums of capital required are so significant that you typically have to have a lot of larger corporate players involved, or startups that are very, very well backed by large corporates, or large family offices, or wealth funds and the likes, because the fit outs of a hotel type infrastructure aren't cheap for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So as far as global trends, there's a couple of couple of brands that would probably be seen as being sort of global frontrunners. In New Zealand, we have a brand locally called The Co, which is pretty much the only real truly co-living provider in New Zealand right now, and they've done well. They've it's a smaller facility, but they've done a good job, and they're looking to grow. And the market's so big, it's really like you could come to this market 10 years from now and there'll still be opportunity. The demand is just going to be huge.
Well, that's my next question. Like, in your opinion, 10 years from now, what is the co-living space going to look like? Do you have in your crystal ball, if you're projecting out?
Well, look, our initial business model was very much an Asia-wide model. So, we were looking at building a business that sort of started here in New Zealand and incubated our first project, kind of tested, measured, then moved to Australia, then up through into Asia. So it was it was kind of like one of those let's go global from NZ type of stories. I think, the reality of it is in 10 years' time from now, I think, a very small percentage of the actual accommodation or residential accommodation market will be co-living. Not because the product doesn't resonate with people or isn't of interest to people, but just simply that the residential market is so huge that even a small percentage of that is large. If you get me. So we were very much going to target the premium end of the market. Really we're looking to target people who were perhaps financially capable, time poor, looking to some respects almost buy a bit of experience. I know it sounds horrible, but buy access to experience. But they needed a lot of support services wrapped around them just because their lives were probably either busy with their career or some sort of profession, or maybe even some passion that they're involved with that required huge amounts of their time. Whether or not that market exists to the same scale as it did 9 weeks ago is jury's out. I hazard a guess it's probably been reduced significantly. So we may be looking to sort of do a lighter version of where we probably initially were going to pitch. The mid-market is still a very large market, yeah. Well, interesting enough, two of the bigger players globally have raised a significant amount of capital through COVID.
Wow.
Sort of $20 to $30 million US tranches of incoming capital. So, those could have been agreements that were in play well before COVID actually hit and just kind of got to the media during COVID. But nonetheless, there still seems to be a lot of appetite in the space. I think COVID's interesting because I think from a bubble perspective, a small community of several hundred people living in close proximity, whilst it does provide you with community transmission within that bubble, and someone said to me the other day, that sounds like a cruise liner. Yeah, okay, there are elements of that, but assuming you've got ways to mitigate people getting on the cruise ship without the virus, or with the virus, I should say, then the cruise ship would be a great place to be for 4 weeks if everyone's healthy. You'd have a great time. So it becomes more about how would you mitigate that sort of border